Welcome back to the Extra Rep Podcast, guys. I'm Josh.
I'm Liam.
So today we're going to talk about how you look isn't always a representation of how healthy you are. And this is going to be a bit of a sort of broad topic that we'll cover, but I think especially, being in the fitness industry, there's always a sort of worship towards people who would like compete, for example, and get down to these ridiculously lean levels of body fat. So
Or people that are taking gear.
Correct. Or people that are taking drugs. So I think it's important to go through this from a health standpoint as well. It's going to be a bit of a swinging pendulum. Of course, if you're someone who's overweight, it's going to be, okay, we need to get you into a quote unquote healthy body fat percentage or healthy weight range. But then the other problem that occurs is some people take it too far, right? They will get leaner to the point of, things happening and taking them more towards the unhealthy side of things. So I think, Liam, the first thing to sort of discuss is maybe what are the sort of like risks versus rewards of getting super, super lean?
Super lean? Well, any bodybuilding competitor or anyone who's competed or just dieted down or done like a really crazy 8-week challenge, whatever it may be, you tank your hormones. And you also have a really high risk of IBS. So that's irritable bowel syndrome, or IBD for a lot of people. And the reason is because you're under such a stress state. Your body can't handle being on 1,200 calories and you're doing 90 minutes of cardio a day in a weight training session and eating bugger all and trying to supplement to keep everything functioning, and then you're not sleeping because you're so hungry, and there's so many different things that go on, right? People would look at you and say, you look amazing, right? And people love to post about it online, but internally, and I know this because I look at a lot of these people's blood work. A lot of people come to me after shows and I have to clean up a lot of damage and write different protocols because either their gut is messed up or we look at their blood work panel and a lot of things have just pretty much completely shit themselves. It'd be a half an hour podcast just for me to list the specific markers that really tank when it comes to actual chronic dieting, I would say.
With chronic dieting, so maybe if you can quickly go through what are the sort of the main, hormones you see that get disrupted, and sort of why that sort of happens when you get into that sort of chronic dieting of under eating, over consuming, that sort of thing.
Yeah. So the interesting thing here is I will just mention that you can, like a skilled practitioner can pick out digestive habits through a questionnaire and then also see it on a lipid and blood panel. But at the same time, the biggest one I want to touch on is hormones, because everything circulates in one and it all comes back to each other, like the gut, the bloods, the hormones, all that stuff. But specifically your hormonal panel for male and both female, it's everything to do with pretty much your sex hormones, like your SHBG, your estradiol, your testosterone, your free testosterone, your follicle stimulating hormone, your luteinizing hormone, all of them tank. Your DHEA, your IGF-1, which is the precursor to growth hormone, and, insulin that we love to talk about on this podcast. They all tank.
So when they tank, what do you see as negative side effects that start happening from, a health perspective, I guess?
Yep. It does depend on, say, if it's a male or a female. Mainly men, they find they literally get depressed, and then also they just have no energy at all. They've got a very low mood, no sex drive or anything like that. Whereas women, they find that either there's risk of blood sugar spikes and binge eating, they completely lose their period, and it can take up to, multiple months just to get that back.
Yeah, I think, like you said, women losing a period is a really, really big thing. And that when I find, when you talk about competitors, the pendulum swung, but a long time ago when I was getting into that and hearing about it, it was most coaches were saying it's just common. You're just going to lose it and too bad almost. There was no education around it. And don't get me wrong, there's some coaches obviously very skilled, you will lose it for this period of time, you'll get it back at this time and they could work their magic. But for a lot of people, they just run these women to the ground. They'd have no exit plan out of, like I said, these super lean body fat percentages. And that's when, crazy weight regain, binge eating, all these things started to come into play a lot more.
Yep. No one talks about the reverse dieting stage and, the post-show notes and everything you have to do after a show, because the dieting that you do before a show, you pretty much have to do the exact same thing to get out after the show. If you're working with the right coach and you have the right approach. A lot of people just, once they've done it, they've got their photos, cool, and then it just goes into a spiral of just binging after it.
Yeah, and I think that's really important because It's like anytime you just do a normal diet, right? Say you're an average Joe, you want to lose 10 kilos or something, you get to your ideal body weight. What happens? Normally you don't go, oh, I'm just going to slowly bring calories back up to maintenance, or you don't have a plan, right? You just go straight back to, oh, I'll just eat what I used to. And, if you haven't maintained those habits, this is why a lot of people will start yo-yo dieting up and down. And in terms of yo-yo dieting, I sort of wanted to ask, do you think, because there's a lot of people that will quote unquote say, if you keep doing this yo-yo dieting, it crashes your metabolism. It's like, we know it's not like completely true. But what sort of happens in that, if you're going through periods of like quickly losing, then gaining it back, quickly losing, gaining it back? What do you find happens, hormonally there as well?
Well, hormonally, interestingly enough, because it's not just competitors, but if someone was doing that in like a dieting approach of like, I'm going to diet real strict, then I'm going to do a gaining phase, then I'm going to diet real strict, then I'm going to do a gaining phase, I actually don't see that much damage as long as you know what you're doing and you're balancing yourself out. But when it's taken to the extreme and when it's going on for like multiple weeks and multiple months, then other lifestyle factors come into play. That's when you can start to get, really disrupted guts, disrupted sleep, nutrient partitioning can be a little bit off as well. Certain supplementations needs to be put in place depending on the person. A lot of people find that they actually just get a lot more sort of resistance to certain foods that they used to eat as well, because the gut microbiome has that constant shift going on. So there's a few different things that play there.
Yeah, it's really interesting with the gut stuff and with the, insulin sensitivity and things like that, because I find if I've had clients that have come from like that sort of dropping heaps and then like trying to quote unquote bulk up, but they've done it themselves, so it's really they've dropped their calories, their protein's not where it needs to be, their micronutrients are where they need to be, and they've tried to build up, they just eat whatever they want. And this is where it becomes that issue of like, it becomes more difficult to lose the body fat because of, as I said, insulin isn't the devil, but like the resistance to that goes up, the gut issues happen, all these little things start working against you, and it makes it a lot harder every time you then go into a diet. You almost feel like, why does this feel even harder this time? And the weight's coming off slower, and it's because of these years of sort of going up and down that I find a lot of people really struggle with, and that's when, again, you get to those super lean levels of body fat. That's why it's really important that if you feel like you're having issues, like probably, obviously looking at your lifestyle first, but then getting a blood test and having a look at those blood panels to see, if there's anywhere that's, it's really starting to affect, how well you can lose fat, gain muscle, do all those things.
Exactly. And people need to remember that your body has a certain set point. So if you've been a certain weight for a long period of time, your body wants to stay there. And it's a form of homeostasis in your base metabolic rate. Like, you can change it, yes. But let's say you strip away 5-10 kilos, however many, and you want to stay now at that set point, you need to not only resistance train, but you need to also accumulate the lifestyle of sleep, eating at maintenance, and giving your body time to actually accumulate to that set point. It sounds stupid to a lot of people, have been like, I just have to maintain this level, but it's true. Your body needs to sort of reset its basal metabolic rate, and we call it a body set point.
Yeah, and I think with the body set point, it's really interesting because a lot of people, like I said, they'll drop the 10 kilos. And this is what I like doing with a lot of people is obviously dropping body fat first, but then saying, okay, like, do you want to stay like this, or why don't we now try and build you back up a little bit with a bit more muscle? So that's when, it can be important to do a bit more of a, you call it like a gaining phase. And again, we're not talking you're just going to put on 10 kilos in 10 weeks because we know it's mainly just going to be body fat. You don't need that much. Like, I like to, with my guys and girls, like 0.25 kilos a week, I like to see sort of increase on the scale to 0.5, depending on how, crazy lean you are and how much you want to gain and how fast you respond and those things. But I think that set point thing really does actually, it sounds like a bit of bro science, but there really is a lot of, a lot of stuff behind it to be, the body does like being, if you've been 100 kilos for 5 years, you go down to 80, the body is going to want to, slightly keep bumping you up and just getting you back to those normal habits. So it's important you dial those in. And like I said, I strongly recommend then trying to slowly gain up with a bit more muscle. And that's going to improve, obviously, not only how you look, but, how you look at that actual body weight. So
exactly. And depending on the health at that body weight. I mean, that's the whole point of this podcast. It's looks can be deceiving, really, on what is and what isn't healthy for a lot of people. And there's healthy quote unquote body fat percentages that are generic for male and female. But, some people say 15% body fat is healthy for a male, right? For me, I'm actually a little bit unhealthier than I'd like to be if I'm at 15% body fat. I find if I'm at 11 or 12% body fat, my blood work markers are a lot better. Now, yes, I'm someone that monitors it a lot, but genetics come into play because we all know someone who eats like absolute shit but has no body fat on them. And I guarantee if you look at their blood work, you'd be able to see what's actually going on with their health. And this is the same thing for online, right? People can look absolutely amazing, but they're not posting how they feel or what they do 24 hours of the day. You don't know that they're actually an insomniac and they can't fall asleep because they're literally tossing and turning because they're so hungry all night.
Or can't sleep, or, you know, having all these, crazy issues. And I find that's,
Exactly.
there's a really...
short temper, road rage, snapping, like all these little things.
Yeah, and like that's like a lot of people you'll find it's like you said, that lean person, right? You go, this person's always been super lean, right? And you know, a lot of the time, unfortunately, on social media, it's like if something's too good to be true, you know, it normally is, right? There's definitely the 1% outliers genetically, but I can guarantee you, anyone who looks in like a ridiculously lean level of shape, you know, has taken something. I can almost guarantee it for 99%.
The giveaway for that is how much muscle mass do they hold onto while being really, really lean.
Yeah.
Because if you've actually seen someone who's truly a natural with muscle mass on him and he looks a lot bigger than he actually is because he is lean, but he's not freakishly big and lean.
Yeah, it's like that. It's like that. I call it like muscle maturity almost. It's like the muscles just still look really mature and dense and massive. Like, and it's just a telltale sign, you know, that they've obviously been doing something else, you know. And again, I don't really care with that. It's like you can do whatever you want. The thing that pisses me off, and it's a bit of a side tangent, it's when they lie to people about it. So they'll use their body to be like, oh, hey, if you follow my diet plan and follow my, 7-step ab workout, you'll get abs like me, you'll look like me. And it's a load of bullshit. And that's, probably the one thing I hate the most in the fitness industry. It's because they're trying to lie and deceive with their body that they haven't got naturally 99% of the time to get you to think, oh, well then if I pay them, I'll look like them, which isn't the case.
Exactly. I know this one dickhead from the UK who, uses this, exactly what you mentioned, to sell his course and everything, and I won't name names.
I know which guy he is.
But he goes, I've never eaten a McDonald's burger and blah, blah, blah. Why would I put that shit in my body? But it's like, you drink alcohol and you take steroids.
Yeah.
I'm like, it's doing 10 times more damage than eating that McDonald's burger, mate. Like,
100%.
Yeah.
And I think that's important as well, that there is, when you're looking at levels of leanness, everyone is going to be different genetically. So you'll probably see this especially in women, right? Because they come in, more varied shapes than the guys, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like if they have wider hips or something, it's like you will see a girl and she might have like, those wider hips, but look very lean, right?
Yep.
But it looks completely different to someone who's got really narrow hips, right? Yep. Like the person with narrow hips is naturally just going to look way, way leaner. Mm-hmm. And that's not, not anyone's fault. It's just genetics and biology and how that works.
It's the same with men as well. If you have wider shoulders and smaller hips, and some people have small shoulders and wider hips, like bone structure, it's a real thing.
Mm-hmm. And that's why you're going to see like the top 0.001% who are doing those massive Mr. Olympia bodybuilding shows. They've already been blessed with like the perfect genetics, the perfect muscle insertions, and then they add the drugs on top. So they'd already be crazy without the drugs, right? Naturally, they just touch a weight and they grow.
Yep.
They double in size.
You see all those competitors, and on their social medias or in interviews or something, you always get like, this is what I looked like at 15. I'm like, have you guys ever seen like The Rock at 15?
Yeah. Like they're just massive.
It's already bigger than me.
Yeah.
I'm just like, I've been training for 15 years. Fuck.
Yeah. I think genetically it's, again, like I used this example when I was at Bayfit at the other gym. Maori guy came in. He was like with the Melbourne Storm, like the development squad.
Yep.
He'd come in. He'd never touched a weight in his life. He already looked massive, right? And I'm like, okay, let's get on the bench press. It was his first exercise. He benched 140 for 10 reps with his palms open.
Yeah.
And then I told him to close them, and then he benched 150 for 6. And I've never felt so small in my life. And he goes, oh, that's my first time at the gym. And he wasn't lying. You could tell he was just like, oh, like, is that good? Like, had no clue. And I was like, this is why genetics, some people can just be absolutely genetic freaks, just depending on your makeup, depending on that. You could tell he's never done a drug in his life. Like, he was just absolute sports person, went through the system in rugby, and they just said, okay, you need to get in the weights room now and get stronger. And that's what happened.
Exactly. And it all comes down to, like, looks can be very deceiving when it comes to health. And we just wanted to shed some light and education of that on the podcast, mainly because we see it from clients' perspectives. We've been, I wouldn't say the word victim, but like we've been, exposed to it because we see it online just like everyone else. And you can get down on yourself and be like, I trained XYZ for this long and I followed this plan perfectly, and why don't I look like that person? It's like, I reckon the biggest one that's the worst for it is Hollywood, because everyone watches a movie and sees an actor who admittedly is now taking like Anavar and all these things, and it's like they got in this ridiculously quick superhero role shape, and people are like, oh, I did a 12-week training program. Why don't I look like that?
Yeah, so you didn't have the drugs.
It's like, because you didn't have the multi-million-dollar contract as well, bro. Like,
yeah, exactly. People preparing all your food for you. So
yeah, exactly.
I think that is a good like segue into just, going into your lifestyle. It's like, if you've got to a point of like super lean and you're staying super lean, like there's probably something that has become a bit obsessive, like with your lifestyle. So like I'll use an example. There was a girl I talked to years ago, and she was doing like, I think it was like 30,000 steps a day. And that's normal. Like didn't have a car, 30,000 steps a day, like completely normal, like vegan as well.
Yep.
So eating stuff all protein. And then she developed like was it called REDS? It's like one of those, basically syndromes where it's like, the muscle starts eating itself and everything goes on basically red alert, right?
Yep.
So I think she obviously sees herself as, oh, I'm super lean, like I look good. And we're not doubting that, but it does get to a point where, like I said, if your blood work gets to that point, everybody is going to have a different level of leanness until that starts to deteriorate. And that's going to look, very different in different people. So I think it is important to understand that you definitely can do too much in terms of that exercise sort of things. And, you can get yourself into that mindset and that loop of like, oh, I've got to do my 30,000 steps today. And that's where we don't want it to get to. We want it to be structured for a period of time when you diet. But then once you finish the diet, yes, we need a bit of an exit strategy, but you also need to just chill the fuck out. So many people are so rigid, and it's like, of course, still follow programs, still do this, but it's like, you can have that donut, you can have this, you can have that. It's just about managing it, managing the expectations, having things every now and again, and developing that new lifestyle without going back to those old patterns of, just eating whatever you wanted all the time.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, because education around food quality, your diet, all that stuff is so important. Like that example that you just gave, my ex-girlfriend about 3 years ago, she literally went vegan for 2 years, got into like fasting, all that stuff, lost her period, was doing 30,000 steps a day. She was working in a busy restaurant, so on your feet, back, forth, back, forth, back, forth. And she got a whole host of gut issues, lost her period, no libido, all this stuff, just had all these hosts of issues, all because of decisions that she made when she thought she was making the healthier decision, the healthier choice.
Yeah, and that's like, that's sort of where I almost want to like really hammer home this point of like, if you decide, for example, I'm going to try a different diet, maybe I'm going to go carnivore, maybe I'm going to go vegan, whatever it is, you've got to understand that there's pros and cons to this, and you can't do this for the rest of your life and be healthy. I'm just going to say it. Like, a lot of people think, oh, if I just do this and it'll be better. It's like, for example, what happens when you go on a carnivore, vegan, whatever diet? Generally, you get rid of all the crap that you've been eating, right? All the processed shit. And so, of course, things are going to improve, right? You're going to start feeling better at this and that. But then over time, that's when, through the blood work and that, you'll start missing micronutrients. You'll start missing certain things. And that's when the blood work starts, getting worse. And then you're like, but I'm eating healthy. I'm doing all the right things. Why am I feeling like shit? So it's really is a combination, guys. And you need to understand that you will do, you can do certain diets for certain periods of time for specific reasons, or whatever works for you. But you've always got to come back to that, bit of variety, bit of food quality, looking after your micronutrition, and looking after, your stress, sleep, and all those things as well. Because all those are going to play a much bigger part than just deciding you want to go carnivore for 2 weeks, for example.
Huge. And I just want to finish off with, we mentioned pretty much people as just like competitors and stuff, but this goes for athletes as well. Athletes in any sport. Like, for example, I've got a mate who's an Olympic long distance runner, and I've read his blood work, and his testosterone was in the absolute gutter. But you could look at him from his performance standpoint and think he's absolutely healthy. He's, running in the Tokyo Olympics. Like, you don't make it to that level without some form of skill and actual health as well. But it's like, then you look at the blood work and it's like, okay, is this sustainable? Well, not if he wants kids.
Yeah, I think that's, and it goes both ways, right? Because athletes are going to do anything, right, to get to where they want to be. So, yeah, I think it's really important when we're working with athletes is that, pulling them back from themselves, because they're just going to want to keep training. It's all they've ever known, right?
Yep.
They've only known that structure, consistent routine for how many years it's drilled into them. So if someone, who has no idea about nutrition just tells them to do X, Y, Z, they're just going to do it, right?
Leaky gut is actually so common in athletes from just chronic stress of just performing balls to the wall.
Yeah, I think that's a really good place to leave it. But guys, hope you've enjoyed the episode. Again, if you guys do have any trouble at the moment, if you are extremely lean or extremely on the other end, you need help with blood work, you need help with coaching, obviously you can reach out to me at Action Fitness Nutrition, or obviously Liam at Coach Liam C. Murphy. And again, if you can share out the podcast, guys, that would be fantastic. We're past 50 episodes now, which is awesome. So want to get it out to as many people as possible and help as many of you as possible. But we will see you guys in the next podcast.
See you guys.